little bit of a change of pace, which is probably a good thing. We're going to be looking at the effects of social and environmental enrichment on the welfare and work performance of kennel dogs. And Mia has also been recently awarded the RSPCA Australian Alan White Scholarship for Animal Welfare Research in 2009. Please join me in welcoming Mia.
Thanks everyone for sticking around after the keynotes have left. I'm really glad that you're all here today, and I'm really glad of what a successful day it's been in getting everyone to engage in conversation about dogs, because they are, as Pauline said at the start of the day, really amazing animals. While Sammy is correct in that my research is looking at the effects of enrichment, today I'm really going to focus on just the experience of young dogs entering a kennel facility after they've been in a foster home environment, which is what happens with guide dogs when they go into their puppy raising homes. So domestic dogs play significant roles in the lives of many people around the world today as companion animals. They perform valuable duties in many societies as assistants, detector and security aids, as well as providing entertainment in racing and performance industries. A large proportion of working dogs, as well as dogs primarily kept to breed companion animals, are required to be housed in kennel environments for medium to long-term periods that may range from weeks through to years. In fact, some dogs, such as some military working dogs, may spend all of their lives, from birth through to death, as residents in kennel facilities. Kennel facilities are typically designed for ease of maintaining hygiene, housing numerous individuals safely and securely in a limited amount of space. Because of this, even when facilities are fairly new and kept clean and hygienic, they're often sterile and unable to fulfil dogs' behavioural needs. Certain behaviours have been observed in research in kennel dogs, such as coprophagia, or eating faeces, excessive vocalising, and stereotypic behaviours like floor licking and excessive self-grooming, which may indicate chronic stress in dogs, and as such can help to identify environments where welfare could be improved. Because there's growing awareness of the implications of animal use and housing on welfare that's led to rising public expectations and lower levels of tolerance for housing conditions that are not perceived to be adequate, in recent years it's led to calls for improved provision for the welfare of animals housed in captivity, including the use of enrichment programs for dogs housed in kennels. So my research, which is being conducted with the support of Guide Dogs Victoria, aims to determine whether dogs which are purpose-bred to work and previously exposed to kennel environments as pups still undergo significant stress when returning to commence their routine assessment, which is a week-long process to determine if they'll start the formal guide dog training process. I'm looking at what happens initially when the dogs transition from a home environment to a kennel facility, because we need to have a base measure before we look at the effects of an enrichment program. I'm looking at the behaviour, the physiology and the training success of these dogs, and we're also looking at how dogs are utilising enrichment opportunities. The results can be compared with their temperamental assessment outcomes to see if provision of enrichment does significantly affect stress levels and whether any effect through the assessment period influences their assessment or ultimate working success. The results can also be used to investigate the possibility of an inverted U stress-performance relationship for purpose-bred working canines, and I'll talk about that a little bit more soon. Through this research, information will also be gained about the dog's use of passive enrichment items, such as raised beds and toys that are provided without human interaction, because this will give us more information aimed at aiding the best use of limited resources for shelters and other not-for-profit kennel facilities. So today I'm going to focus on sharing preliminary results from the first part of this project with you. Stress is part of life, I think you'll all agree with that, and it's not inherently bad. However, we know that stress can have damaging effects on individuals. Just think of all the human diseases that we know are associated with a stress-filled life. The challenge is to differentiate between the non-threatening stresses of life and those stresses that can adversely affect an animal's welfare. Acute stresses, or acute is the term we use to describe stresses that affect an animal in the short term, and chronic stresses affect an animal over the longer term. When an animal can't cope with stress, we describe it as being in distress. Unfortunately, there's no perfect test where you can just check, is this animal stressed or not stressed? There's no pregnancy test for stress. So we have to rely on the use of multiple measures to determine what the animal is experiencing to help our interpretations of the effect of an environment. Adaptation is a term referring to the ability to adjust to new information and experiences. Learning is essentially adapting to our constantly changing environment. Through adaptation, animals are able to adopt new behaviours that allow them to cope with change. Resilience is a psychological term used in human psychology that refers to an individual's capacity to withstand stresses and not manifest psychological dysfunction, such as mental illness or persistent negative mood. The mainstream psychological view of resilience, that is, resilience defined in terms of capacity to avoid dysfunction despite difficult circumstances, is developed through a process of training and development of adaptive coping skills, a concept that proposes a recurrent need to weather periods of stress and change successfully throughout life. The ability to weather each period of disruption and reintegration leaves the animal better able to deal with the next change. It's the mental ability to recover quickly from depression, illness or misfortune. If anyone's particularly interested in finding out a bit more about the biology of animal stress, I'd really recommend this book. It's fantastic. It's called The Biology of Animal Stress, and it's about the basic principles and implications for animal welfare, and it's edited by Moberg and Mensch. So why does it matter? Well, for one, it's my job. I'm employed as a training kennels and vet clinic department manager at Guide Dogs Victoria, and to summarise my job in one line, I'm responsible for the health and wellbeing of all the dogs in my care. That's what started this project. We wanted to make sure we were looking after our dogs in the absolute best way that we could. There's a risk that the kennel environment could increase levels of stress, which would reduce levels of canine welfare. So looking at this proposed relationship between pressure or stress and performance, and this is something that's been applied in human psychology, you can see that a little bit of stress can help you achieve your best, but too much stress and your performance will drop right off. This has been associated in situations like exams with students, where when they're well prepared and they just get a little bit of stress, they can perform quite well, but if they're freaking out because they haven't been well prepared, they'll really crash and burn. I'm really interested in seeing if this sort of relationship exists within working dogs. So, because the kennel environment could reduce levels of welfare, it's potentially problematic, not only to the welfare of the animals, but also in terms of their ability to provide the desired service for humans. If this leads to increased stress, potential working dogs may fail their training and accreditation programs for substance detection, guide or assistance work. So to give you a bit of background to this study, just looking at the effect of dogs entering kennels, our control group were dogs that stayed in their puppy raising homes throughout metropolitan Melbourne, and we've sampled them over an 18-month period. They stayed there for a 30-day period, which was equivalent to what we were sampling with the dogs that entered kennels. The treatment group, which is the dogs that started off at home and then entered the kennels, were assessed when they came in, as they would have routinely as part of their assessment process before commencing formal training, as I outlined earlier. Both groups were sampled on day 0, and for both groups that was at home in their puppy raising environment. 2 weeks and 1 day later they were resampled. For the dogs that had entered kennels, that was 24 hours after arriving in the kennel facility. And then again a fortnight later at time 3, which was day 29. The measures that we looked at were less invasive measures of physiology, which was salivary cortisol and immunoglobulin A. They're stress hormones, or can be used to indicate stress in the saliva. I haven't got the IgA results back from the laboratory yet, so today I'll just be talking about the cortisol and also the blood results, which we did a lower frequency of sampling with the bloods. With the saliva we actually took 6 samples, but today I'll just be talking about those 3 main times. Within the blood work we looked at neutrophil lymphocyte ratios. So with both the cortisol and the neutrophil lymphocyte ratios, higher scores are indicative of a stress response. So the higher the scores go, the more stressed the animal is.